Yeah, we're definitely a couple rounds. Remember, it's in 16-round tournament. It's so different from the other formats you play because it's a lot more. It's a marathon, not a sprint. A lot of players, even ones hiding out at X and 2, we'll see some of them rise up to challenge for top 8.
A Temple of Deceit is where BBD began. He put the top card to the bottom. Briksza is going to do the exact same with his Temple of Abandon. Back to Braun-Duin we go. That'll be a Temple of Enlightenment. Of course, a lot of temples in Brian's deck. That's how this deck does operate. You can see the Aetherling in his hand. Briksza doesn't have as many, but he started off with a couple as he's left the top card on top. Braun-Duin will draw a copy of Sphinx's Revelation. We'll see if he has anything interesting to do on his third turn. As you mentioned, no counter magic. And the big question is how many people are going to know that? Because if you follow Brian, especially that Vegas Invitational, you know he's not a counter magic kind of guy.
Yeah, and I was actually just going to say the way that Rudy can actually get into this game because Brian doesn't play things like counterspells would be a turn 3 Domri to recoup a lot of his card advantage. And as you see, just on point, on turn 3, Rudy draws the Domri.
It didn't hit with that activation, but as you mentioned, that's a card that can undo this double mulligan here for him, so Domri's definitely got some work to do. Braun-Duin does cycle an Azorius Charm. He's going to tap 3 mana. We might see it Attentions here. Maybe a Banishing Light, and it will be Banishing Light to take care of Domri. Success and Tactics was the card that Briksza did look at for the turn. That was his draw. He'll play a 4th land and a pull of Chronos before passing the turn back over to Braun-Duin.
Yeah, so a tough spot for Rudy because he was on the Multiply. He was able to make a quality threat in Domri and to follow up with Pelucranos. But if you're John and you play this matchup a lot, he's got to be pretty wary about the chances that this Hydra is going to survive. Esper has a multitude of ways to take down a 5-mana creature.
It is certainly rare for Pelucranos to live in this matchup. Now, one thing as well, Pithing Needle is a card that is in Brian Braun-Duin's hand right now, which I had to give a little double take. Saying, is that in the main deck? Did he forget to de-sideboard? No, there's one in the main.
Yeah,
really?
He does have one in the main. What I think is interesting here, so I believe it was his top deck. Yeah. It's a little bit of missed sequencing there, which he could have done had he drawn it a turn earlier. He could have put the Needle on the Domri and would have the answer ready for Pelucranos. But even as it is, Brian does not fear this 5/5 too much.
And he will just take 5. Looks like this is going to be a rev for 2, so up to 17 he goes. A very expensive divination here.
Yeah, and I think what Brian wants to do is he just wants to continue to hit his land drops. You see he has cards like Aetherling, and off that Revelation he has Elspeth and Azorius Charm. As long as he can make his land drops, he's a huge favorite to win this game.
I'd imagine that's the case. You saw, again, the Revelation for 2. He's going to play a Temple of Silence, so he does hit a land drop, but it comes into play tapped. You can see the Elspeth in his hand that I imagine he wanted to play on this turn, but he was unable to. This is 4 mana. Supreme Verdict will trade with the legendary Hydra. A Courser of Crufix comes rolling off the top here for Briksza, so he will play that. We'll take a look at the top card, which is Xenagos the Reveler. A Stomping Ground will come into play. Briksza will gain a life and simply pass the turn back over to Braun-Duin, who will untap those lands. He'll take a draw. You can see the Aetherling. That's what he's going to finish the game off with, but he's got a few more steps before we get there.
Yeah, what Brian wants to do is he wants to save his generic threats for possible top decks that Briksza could have. So, for example, he had the option of, if he has the option of Elspeth killing a Pelucranos, Supreme Verdict killing a Pelucranos, Azorius Charm taking care of a Pelucranos. He doesn't want to just be thinking about the Pelucranos. He wants to be thinking about things like a possible Stormbreath Dragon, maybe even a main decked Mistcutter Hydra. He probably doesn't want to use his last Supreme Verdict, for example.
The Needle looking pretty good right now. Going to knock down Xenagos. We'll take a look at the top card here. It's another copy, of course, of Crufix. Needle is a really interesting card because, it's just this card. It's cheap, but it takes care of a lot of different things. Xenagos, you can, of course, say Elspeth, even though Brian has access to those in his deck, as well as Domri and a bevy of other cards I'm not even thinking of right now. You actually kind of like that card as a main deck card in this format.
Yeah, what I liked there was that he was able to use Rudy's Courser against him. Normally, when you Pithing Needle a Planeswalker, you have to be okay with the fact that they get 1 activation off it before you needle it. Because Courser was showing the top card, Brian was actually able to preemptively needle the Planeswalker.
You saw Azorius Charm take care of the Courser, put that back on top. So the top 2 cards for Briksza's deck is Courser. So Brian knows exactly what's going to happen over the next couple of turns. His first play this turn will be a Mutavault. It looks like he's considering maybe playing Aetherling, maybe Elspeth a little bit more safe, but the window is wide open here for Brian. Just depends on what he wants to do, and he is going to go with the Sun's Champion.
Yeah, and unless Rudy has an answer in his hand with that remaining card, Brian knows the coast is clear. He knows Rudy's not going to top deck an answer in either of the next 2 turns.
So Courser comes back off the top of the deck to reveal the Courser that everyone already knew about. Braun-Duin will untap those 6 lands, take a draw here. Looks like he picked up a copy of Temple of Deceit. He also has a Supreme Verdict in his hand, and we can't forget about that Aetherling, as Elspeth is going to tick up to 6, so 3 more Soldier tokens are coming in.
Yeah, and I like the way that Brian's just has grabbed control of this, positioned for Elspeth, and now it's going to let her guide this game home. 6 tokens. The only thing that he really would have to worry about is, I suppose, if the next turn there's a card like Stormbreath Dragon, but you do see an ultimate price hiding out in Brian's hand, which pretty much insulates him from any of Rudy's top decks.
Yeah, again, the Courser's going to go to the grip, and there's Stormbreath Dragon for the next turn, but as you mentioned, he's good against pretty much all Rudy's top decks. Rudy knows that, so he's just going to pick up his cards, concede this one, and move to the next game. Braun-Duin is going to win game number 1 of our first match here, round number 9 of 16 of our Season 2 Invitational. Esper Control up a game over Jund Monsters, but things are going to change quite a bit now. Take a look at Briksza's sideboard. There's a Doomblade. That one doesn't matter very much. 3 Mistcutter Hydras do. An additional Setesian Tactics. There's another Unravel the Aether, a Vraska the Unseen, 2 copies of Rakdos' Return, 2 Golgari Charms, 2 Putrefy, a Whip of Erebos, and a Chandra Pyromaster. You're an Esper player at heart, so I ask you, my friend, which of these cards are you really scared of from a sideboard?
Well, there's a lot of stuff. The fact that Rakdos' Return has come back into favor is certainly something that no control deck likes about the format. Especially in conjunction with Courser of Kruphix, that card can be really scary. The Jund player can play a Courser as a 2/4, and unless you have a Doomblade or Last Breath in your hand, you basically are going to have to eventually tap out to Supreme Verdict, a threat like Courser, which they get down so early. The problem is, once you do, you're worried about a Jund Monsters player returning you for 3 or even 4 cards in that situation. So there's a lot of jockeying that has to be done with Rakdos' Return, especially if you're the kind of control player who plays no counter spells in your deck. Rakdos' Return becomes a very terrifying card. On top of that, I think there's a lot of things that blue players don't like. Mistcutter Hydra has always been good against control decks. I think it's less of a liability when you have cards like Doomblade out of Esper than if you were playing straight blue-white. So Brian probably has the Mistcutters covered, but there's just a lot of different angles that Rudy can attack on. He can use Golgari Charm to regenerate his creatures, to blow up the tension spheres. He can use Whip of Erebos as suddenly this artifact enchantment that Brian would have to answer. Where Jund becomes difficult isn't always in any individual card, but the fact that you need to have that Detention Sphere for a Whip, you need to have the Negate for a Rakdos' Return, you need to have the Doomblade for the Mistcutter Hydra, and if you fail on any one of those checks, all of those cards can beat you by themselves.
Well, Brian's sideboard, as you mentioned, we know he likes to take a proactive approach to things, so he's not going to be reactive. He has a couple of negates, but he might take a more proactive approach because he has all these creatures. Yeah,
so I'll be interested to see how Brian sideboards this. Like I said, his sideboard has 12 creatures in it. So this starts with Bloodbaron of Vizkopa, Fiendslayer Paladin, Sin Collector, and Nightveil Spectre. Now, none of these cards are actually cards that I would expect to be particularly good against Jund Monsters, just because their power and toughness don't line up very well with Jund's creatures. That said, if you've committed a 12-card sideboard to creatures, I would think that some amount of creatures are coming in most matchups. So it'll be interesting to see which ones Brian goes toward. I think there's certainly something to be said for a card like Bloodbaron of Vizkopa. That said, the 3 non-creature spells in Brian's sideboard, this is the 2 negates and 1 blind obedience. I expect all of those to come in here. There's a lot of haste in Rudy's deck, and there's a lot of things that you need to negate.
Blind obedience comes and it goes. Oftentimes we'll see one in the sideboard, and if it does show up on time, it is mighty good, especially against this deck that does have Mistcutter Hydra and Stormbreath Dragon after sideboard. We can't forget about those Xenagos Satyr tokens as well. A really, really good card in this matchup.
Yeah, there's a lot of haste out of the Jund deck post-sideboard. Also, occasionally, especially when someone's blowing up your detention spheres, Domri can get really out of control in this matchup. Blind Obedience is one of the few ways that a control deck could win through a Domri emblem. I know that sounds like something you'd never want to do, but with the Blind Obedience, it actually becomes a possibility.
And oddly enough, I have seen players get a Domri emblem in this matchup and lose. Chris Van Meter has told me that story more than once, of getting a Domri emblem against a Revelation deck and things just not working out all that well because they board into so many spells and they have left less creatures to get the job done with.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to be the case here, but it'd certainly make for an entertaining match.
Ideally, Domri will get answered by a Detention Sphere or a Banishing Light, and he never gets to that point.
Well, we shall see. Both players going to roll off their 7 cards, see if they find something that they like. Again, you guys can join us in the conversation at SCG Live, hashtag SCGINVI. Enjoyed the tweets all day long yesterday. We watched Jerry Thompson gamble for a Courser of Kruphix, hard cast the Primeval Titan with his lands deck. We watched the backdoor Rest in Peace win by Kenan Haas. his opponent having a rest in peace in play when he was playing his Jund Depths deck, and Kennen with the one sideboarded Helm of Obedience, killing him with it. So we had some crazy things happen yesterday. Definitely joining on the conversation all weekend long as we watched the results unfold here of not only our Invitational, but behind us, you guys can't see it right now, but we've got a standard open that people are filing in for. I'm sure it'll be a large one. And then tomorrow, a legacy open. So we're not even close to done here.
No, not at all. Now, I know something when Rudy's keeping his 7 here that I just want to point out to you. So when you're a player of Brian's profile, I think there's sometimes people know about your decks, they know what you're on. Rudy, game 2 in his opening hand, shuffles a Dreadbore through his hand. This has been kept in the matchup.
Yeah?
Against a deck which plays only Aetherling as a creature in the main.
Yeah, I mean, it can't, of course, take care of Elspeth and Jace, things like that, but I think, I think he's preparing for the creatures that are coming in. I expect that to be the case because, again, if you know Brian has played a deck like this before, and he's boarded in creatures, and also, he's 8-0. Word spreads about, well, BBD's doing this weekend, so you might want to prepare accordingly, and maybe leave in more creature removal than you would in most cases. So I'm a little bit surprised to see that, especially given the options in Rudy's sideboard, where he does have to cut a lot of cards because he's got so many cards to bring in.
Yeah, well, he does have some cards that I think to board out in the matchup. He obviously has Mizium Mortars and Setessan Tactics, cards that are not very good here. And actually, a lot of his 4-drops that are just big and nothing else, I'm talking about cards like Pelucranos and Desecration Demon, they're not fantastic in this matchup either, as they're really liable to get Azorius Charmed.
Temples to begin for each player. BBD going to leave the top card on top. This is a Temple of Malice for Briksza. He takes a look at that hand. He's going to put the top card on the bottom before passing it back to Braun-Duin, who will play a Thoughtseize. So we're going to see what's up right away. A Chandra Power Master, a Whip of Erebos, a Dreadbore, a Mistcutter Hydra, and a couple of lands. One thing you will notice is that Briksza only has 1 black mana at this point, so Whip of Erebos is off for right now, but that's a much longer term effect. So the fact that he can't play it on turn 4 at this point doesn't really matter very much.
Yeah, I expect Brian will take the Chandra here. And while Rudy has a lot of cards that are very good in the matchup, cards like Whip and Mistcutter Hydra, his hand actually doesn't do anything at the moment. He's going to grant Brian a lot of time.
Yeah. Chandra, not a card to be terrified of. It is a slow card advantage engine. Emphasis on the slow, because that's what it is. And Brian going to take care of a Mistcutter Hydra at the expense of 2 life, so he is at 18 right now. I assume we'll see a second land in just a moment, and there that is, Temple of Enlightenment, which may help him find the 3rd land. He will pass the turn back over to Briksza. That's a stomping around, just simply pass the turn back over to BBD, who will draw a card. It's a Jace Architect of Thought. That is a Hallowed Fountain, simply passing the turn back. Rudy did find a second black source, but he opts to play a forest, and now this is a Chandra. Does Brian have the negate? He does.
Yeah, Brian has the negate. Rudy was really doing a counter spell check on Brian there. I think if he was worried about the negate, he would have wanted to lead out on the whip. As it is, Brian's just going to be able to tear apart Rudy's hand. As you see, I have another Thoughtseize here.
Yeah, this looks pretty tough here. She wonders if you take care of the Dreadbore or the Whip now that Briksza can cast the Whip, but there are no creatures in the graveyard for the Whip. Can't bring back Mistcutter Hydra, of course, so I wonder which card Brian cares about here.
I would imagine he still takes the Whip. Dreadbore's almost on Brian's game plan. He plays a Jace, -2s it, Rudy spends a card on it. That's a pretty great spot, but he's going a step farther. He's going to take the Dreadbore, just not worried about Whip.
Yeah, Brian has 2 Detention Spheres in his hand. One thing D-Sphere can't take care of is a top deck Mistcutter Hydra. In for 4 comes the Hydra. Brian going to go down to 12. Brian does find a copy of Godless Shrine for the turn. He's going to play that untapped, so down to 10 he goes. I wonder if this is a verdict. It's just a Jace.
Yeah, it's going to have to be a Jace. Brian missed his 4th land drop for a turn, and this Mistcutter is pretty dangerous immediately. He's going to want to find one of his Doomblades or ways to answer it.
Well, Thoughtseize Plains and Godless Shrine is not what he's looking for. Briksza the Thoughtseize actually doesn't matter given Rudy's hand right now.
Well, more importantly, Rudy has a 4/4, so if Brian casts a Thoughtseize, he's costing himself a turn right now.
So there's your split. Thoughtseize is actually going to go with a land. I actually like this split here where Briksza says, I don't want to give you 2 lands. You might need both of those to be able to get to something like Elspeth, as you mentioned.
I like the split. Thoughtseize is probably the worst card here for Brian. I'm not even sure he can cast it. And I like that he's paired the Thoughtseize with Godless Shrine, meaning that if Brian wants to take the 2-card pile, he may even have to shock for the land, which once again, 2 damages a turn. So he forced Brian to take a single Plains.
Briksza going to play a land here. 4 mana. What do we top deck? All right, it's just the Whip of Erebos. That's going to come in. That's going upstairs. Briksza says, I don't care about Jace. I want to get you dead. I'll gain 4 life as well. Thank you much.
Yeah, Rudy, I like that he shocks there. There's really no reason not to shock right now. Rudy's life total is not relevant.
Do you like ignoring Jace? He could go after the life total. Jace is pretty
That's,
powerful.
I'm not sure I'd want to ignore Jace as much as I want to keep eyes on the prize. As you see, Banishing Light was that third card down. If you kill the Jace, Brian's locked out.
Yeah, now of course we don't know how the events will always unfold there, but Jace is a very powerful card to leave around when it does let you roll off 3 cards from the top of your deck. And Banishing Light wasn't the only way to get out of the situation either. We know the verdict and other options here. You see also Brian has found a Mutavault, so that could have chump blocked for a turn as well.
Yeah, like I said, Esper has Mistcutter Hydra covered in a lot of ways. When Brian's drawing to 8 outs on the card, we have Doomblade, Ultimate Price, Banishing Light. Actually, it's 10 outs. Doomblade, Ultimate Price, Banishing Light, and the Supreme Verdicts. You have to think that 3 more cards on 10 outs, that's almost a 50% proposition for Brian to find an answer if you give him that Jace. And because Rudy's hand really is all in on this Hydra, I think he wants to take away the draws.
Banishing Light does come down to take care of the Hydra. Looks like Briksza drew a Scavenging Ooze, which isn't great right now. It's basically a 2-mana 3/3 as he can eat the Mistcutter Hydra that's in the graveyard. I think the card that Briksza's looking for right now is Rakdos' Return, especially because Brian's shields look like they're going to be down for a little while here, even though a Sphinx's Revelation was the draw this turn.
Yeah, Rakdos' Return would be great. Stormbreath Dragon, I think, would be ideal, mainly because it has haste, gets 4 in, and then can be whipped for the remainder of the life points. It's immune to the Banishing Light effects or card effects that would put it in exile instead of the graveyard. You know, Rudy right now is in the unfortunate situation of having the combo of Whip of Erebos and Mistcutter Hydras, which they don't whip back very well.
Well, Briksza with a nice draw there. He draws a copy of Golgari Charm. Now you wonder how he wants to use this. He can take down the soldier tokens now, or he can wait for Brian to amass quite a few and then go after them. May lead to a victory, but again, Scavenging isn't something that's going to grow very much here. So in we go. Now this is going to be a Golgari Charm. How do you like the use of this? This is just going to be simply to regenerate.
I mean, you have to think Brian's going to triple block you. And if you do think Brian's going to triple block you, then you're Guardian, you're committed to using this Golgari Charm. Instead, you should be shrinking all the creatures, killing the Elspeth tokens, and then dealing your free points of damage.
And one of the things I don't really particularly love about that play is that Golgari Charm is such a strong card in this matchup. Its versatility is its strength. And I don't feel like Rudy really got the most out of it that turn that he can. I feel like maybe he was a little bit impatient with his use of that card. You see him draw and play a Mutavault for the turn. Yeah,
like I said, I'm not sure he wants to Golgari Charm there. I agree with you that maybe it's wrong. Once you commit to the Golgari Charm, though, you want to make sure you're playing it in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah. 4 cards coming for Sphinx's Revelation. Braun-Duin going to go up to 10. He'll draw another card here, so that'll be 5 new ones here for BBD. As he surveys the board, I notice that he's got to be a Scavenging Ooze. There's a Whip of Erebos out there that's a little bit annoying, but at the end of the day, it's not bringing anything back. And who cares if that thing brings back a Scavenging Ooze? That doesn't matter.
Yeah, Whip is only selectively good in this matchup, especially when you're playing against a player who has so many Detention Sphere and Banishing Light effects. I'm not actually sure how good Whip is against Brian. It doesn't seem like he puts a lot of cards in the graveyard. And not all of Rudy's cards even are good at being whipped back once in the yard.
BBD's going to tap some mana here. This is a Detention Sphere. We'll see what the target's going to be. And he says, all right, Scavenging Ooze, it's time for you to leave. Brian going to tap 3 here. Maybe not. Does have another sphere over there, a couple of lands in the grip. See if he cares about Whip or not. Looks like the answer is yes. So Whip will be taken care of now as well. So some players opting to go the Planner Cleansing route. Brian has made it very clear what he's doing. He feels that these Oblivion Ring-esque effects are still quite good in the format.
Yeah, and I mean, this shows a position of power that he's willing to spend a Detention Sphere to take care of Whip of Erebos. Whip poses no threat now. It's been on the board for a while and really hasn't done anything for Rudy. Brian Detention Spheres it mainly because he just has a lot of Detention Sphere.
Rakdos' Return off the top of the deck here for Briksza. You see he's going to say, how much is this going to do? The answer is 6. So Elspeth is going to go down to 1. Now, of course, the question here, I guess you have to do that in that situation. Yes and no. I think you can force Elspeth to go ultimate, and maybe your goal is to just running Rakdos' Return and try to kill your opponent. Because what does it actually do if you're taking down Elspeth to 1? If you're killing it, I think it's a different story entirely. But because you're bringing it down only to 1, is that the most effective use of the card?
So if you go at Brian, then Elspeth gets to ultimate. She would, the next turn she would go ahead and ultimate. You'd be swinging for what is 18, 22 damage. So it would have been a 2-turn clock. As it is, Rudy was already now in the situation where he basically has 2 turns to top deck a Stormbreath Dragon or a similar card. I don't know if it appreciably changed anything. What I do like about this line is, say Rudy top decks Stormbreath Dragon and swings it. Well, then on the following turn, he has enough mana to just ultimate it and then have it be lethal in 2 turns instead of 3.
Mutavault's going to get in front of a Mutavault. Sylvan Caryatid will get in front of a Soldier token. Brian willing away that life total pretty quickly. One thing that Elspeth can do is it can finish off a game pretty fast, as Briksza's going to draw a card for the turn. He's going to draw and play a forest and concede the game. So Brian Braun-Duin is going to win this match. He's going to move on to 9-0 Esper Control, defeating Jund Monsters.
Yeah, a pretty good matchup here. I think Brian's build of Esper Control